Hi, I'm Wendy. Welcome to my West Coast garden. Today we're going to talk about improving your soil. Last time I talked about soil pH and I forgot to mention a couple of things. I said that my garden had a pretty neutral pH. Well, that's because I primarily have raised beds. The water table in my backyard is so high that I found I couldn't really grow much of anything since I've lived in this house for about 4 years. And so last year we built raised beds and they were pretty good. I've amended the soil this year and I'm hoping for even better results. But in a couple of the beds, the soil underneath is probably really acidic. I haven't really tested it. In Canada, we don't have a service like they do in the States, I understand, to have free pH soil testing. So you can take it and get it professionally tested if that's what you want to do. But if you live on the West Coast, you can probably presume that your soil is on the acidic side because it rains so much here and it just leaches everything out of the soil. So probably you're going to need to lime your soil. But one really clear indication of where your soil pH is the plants that are doing well and the weeds that volunteer. So I've put a link to a website below that has a couple of weeds that are common in this part of the world and the soil conditions that they like. One that is a plague in my yard and in many wet West Coast gardens in Vancouver is horsetail. Horsetail is almost impossible to get rid of. There's nothing you can do, organic or inorganic. So the best remedy for horsetail is to improve your soil. So what I'm trying today, I've built a raised bed. Underneath it there was a ton of horsetail. I kind of tried to remove it, but it is so invasive that my success was pretty limited. And even though I put landscape cloth on the bottom of my raised bed before I put the soil in, you can see that it's full of horsetail. So what I've done is this bed, I had limed it probably a month ago. But what I've done now, because since then the horsetails all come up from the soil underneath, not the purchased soil that's in the bed, but it's coming from underneath through the landscape cloth and then into my good soil. So what I'm going to try, and I don't know how successful I will be, is I'm digging the dirt down to the landscape cloth. And on that layer of dirt, I'm going to put quite a lot of lime, so it won't really impact the soil above that my plant roots are in, but it will hopefully leach down into the underlying soil and improve it or bring up the pH of it and make the horsetail less invasive. Another environment that horsetail thrives in is wet, compacted soil. And really, I can't do much about that. When it rains a lot, in my backyard, in the back half of it, it's pretty swampy, and so there's not a lot I can do about that underlying factor. The soil is going to be compacted just by the environment that I'm in. So I've put the raised beds on top. I'm going to lay down some lime, and I'll just show you. I've dug out most of this bed. It's about, I think it's 2 by 8 feet. I've dug it out in quarters. And so this area is about 2 by 4, and I'm going to put 8 ounces of lime in that area, and that should bring down the pH. You need to consult a guide regarding how much lime you need to add because it really depends on what kind of soil you have. I'm using 8 ounces, but if you had a different soil that was more sandy or more clay, you would use a different amount. So I'm adding 8 ounces of lime, and we'll see in a couple of weeks whether it's had any impact. So normally I wouldn't have dug up a bed. I try and layer things because it's way better for the microorganisms in the soil that help to maintain and increase soil health. So when you till or dig up your bed, you disturb those microorganisms and the whole ecosystem around them. And so by disrupting that, you're actually doing more harm than good often. But in this case, I was desperate to get lime to the soil underneath this bed, so I really didn't have any choice. I'll add another layer of compost, and I won't plant this for a few weeks. The other area I'm going to work on today is the soil beside my raised bed that has the lettuce in it. This bed is one of the worst in the yards. We'll probably eventually build a raised bed here, but it is below the water table for most of it, or at the water table, so when it rains a lot, this is just completely mucky. And so the one exception to when you want to dig in a garden bed is when the soil is very compacted. There needs to be a ratio of oxygen in your soil, and if it's very, very compacted, there is no oxygen there, and so it doesn't support the microorganisms. So what I'm going to do is dig in some coconut core. Coconut core is similar to bark mulch, only it's much more sustainable. So it's kind of a new product in Canada. It either comes in these dehydrated cubes, or you can buy it in bags that are a bit more bulk. I think this is a bit more economical. I bought this at my local garden store, but I know you can also buy it online. Personally, I prefer to shop at my local garden store from time to time, even if it's a bit more expensive, because in the dead of winter, when I need that respite of going inside and seeing all the beautiful plants that are in bloom, or when I want to just walk around and look at some different options, I love going to the garden store. And so if I don't support the garden store, it won't be there anymore. And in fact, many garden stores have closed in the last few years. So I choose to buy some of my products there, but if that's not in your budget, you can definitely get it cheaper through Amazon or any of the other online options. This is just a small area. There was a tree in this area and we dug out the stump, so haven't really planted here before, but my plan is to dig this in, lime the soil, and then we'll plant beans here. Beans fix nitrogen into the soil, which means they can take it from the air and through their roots put it into the ground. So we'll grow the beans and then we'll till under the stalks after the beans have finished, and that will hopefully improve this bed so that I can plant something in it next year. So I've moistened the coconut core and I've just sort of thrown it here on top, and you can see it's pretty wet. And now I'll just put it into the soil. It's going to rain really shortly, and so that will really help to get the lime washed into the soil, and then we'll go from there. The other thing that I'm trying to improve the soil is green manure. This area, no one had really taken care of it. It doesn't get a ton of sun, and so my solution, rather than planting grass, was to try and improve the soil and work out what kind of ground cover or something I could plant there. But until I did that, I was going to put down straw to just keep the weeds down. This is actually an unintentional experiment. I bought straw, which turned out to be hay. So it has self-seeded, and it is either rye or wheat. I can't really tell the difference. If you recognize it, maybe you can let me know in the comments below. We've got a green manure sooner than we planned, and what I'll do is I'll just dig it in before the seed pods form, and if a little bit comes up again because I'm also digging in the seed pods that are already there, we'll just cope with that and dig it in one more time. So again, green manure fixes nitrogen in the soil, and so is a great way to improve your soil. So all the best luck in amending your soil and getting the greatest growing conditions for your garden, and thanks for joining me in mine. See you next time.